So we have quite a list of questions sent in from readers far and wide, so I'm going to have to get going if we're going to make it through them. I don't think we will actually make it through them. First is from a parent. I can't remember if this is the mother or the father, so we'll stick with parent. Talking about a 7-year-old who was apparently playing with the parent, at least playing, and was told that he was going to have to stop playing to go and have a bath. And so rather than go and have the bath, the child had a fit, as in 7 years old, on the floor, having a tantrum, kicking and screaming, which is, a little old to be having a tantrum, but some 7-year-olds do. Actually, some 57-year-olds still, pretty much emotionally speaking, throw themselves on the floor and have tantrums, so I guess you can have these at any age. I've watched 57-year-olds have tantrums. So the question from the parent was, what do I do? And actually, this was the mother, I can remember now. And so I asked her, what does she normally do? And apparently she begs with the child, pleads with the child, and then eventually argues with the child and fights with the child, and then eventually slaps the child. Now, I don't think it's funny that a child gets hit. The reason I'm laughing is because this same unproductive pattern keeps being repeated over and over again. And the reason the child engages in behaviors like this is because they work. And then, of course, the mother wonders why the child keeps doing this. Kids only engage in behaviors because they get something from them. And we as parents, ironically, that's why it's funny to me. It's ironic that we wonder, why does this kid do this, when we as the parents are, through our behaviors, teaching the child to engage in the very behavior that we hate most. So it's just a crack up that these behaviors make us nuts, and we're the ones who are teaching the kids these behaviors. So here's the parent who is teaching the child that if the child will just have a big enough fit, then what the parent will do is, instead of engaging in behaviors that lead to a bath, what the parent will do, now picture this from the child's point of view. Picture this in the head of the kid. Here's this little 7-year-old kid going, this is very funny from the viewpoint of the kid. The kid is going, if I will throw a tantrum, I can get my, 35-year-old mother to scream, yell, beg, plead, bark like a dog, balance a ball on the end of her nose. I can get her to do pretty much anything I want. Well, come on, if you were a kid, wouldn't you throw a tantrum? Duh. So the kid learns to throw a tantrum because this kid absolutely controls his mother. I mean, as though he's got a ring fastened in the end of her nose. So of course he throws a tantrum. He's got her. He's got her nailed. So he keeps doing it. So I said, you got to get off the field of death with this kid. I got this question by phone. I'm just sort of sharing with you after the fact. You got to quit playing this game with this child. There can be no change in tone of voice with this kid. You can't beg. You can't plead. You can't yell, because all of those are field of death behaviors. Just because somebody issues you a perfectly enticing or apparently fascinating invitation to the field of death doesn't mean you have to accept. So, when the kid starts yelling, just as calmly and quietly as can be, you speak to the child gently. The quieter you speak, the quieter the child will be to hear you. You got to remember, children don't have tantrums in vacuums. They have tantrums so that you will do something. So as the child's having a tantrum, the child's actually listening out of both ears to see what you'll do. So if you speak quietly, the child will be going, what? So speak quieter, and the child will get quieter. How do I know this? Because I've seen this many times. Because I've helped parents through these tantrums. And so you speak calmly to the child, and there are any number of things you can say. What you say after you fail to get on the field of death almost becomes irrelevant. But you don't use getting and protecting behaviors. You can't do it. And if you feel like you're going to get angry and have a fit, then you have to go call another adult until you can do this lovingly. Because if you're feeling angry, you won't be able to hide it. But there are lots of things you could say. Children love to have choices. They hate being controlled. And if you violate the law of choice, pretty much you're dead. So you could do things like, for example, and this is just one choice, 100 ways you could handle this. Don't take this as like some little series of steps you have to follow. People make that mistake. They hear me say, you have to handle it this way. No. The primary way you handle it is to not be angry. That's the primary way. Then the other suggestions I offer are just one of 100 technique-y ways you can handle it. Those are irrelevant. So you could say to the child, Fred, we'll call him that. So, Fred, would you like to play a game? Well, the child is instantly going to listen because a game sure sounds a lot better than a bath. And the kid's going, sure. So, let's do this. How many seconds do you think it will take you to go from here to the tub and back? I don't know. You say, well, I think it'll take you 17 seconds. How many seconds do you bet? Now, in order to play these games with kids, you have to have toys around, like stopwatches, stuff like that. This particular game takes a stopwatch. It takes a, I'm just making this up as I go, because I used to do this kind of stuff with my kids. It takes a stopwatch, it would take a thermometer, and it would take a ruler or a tape measure. These are just things I'm thinking up as we talk. So you would say, so how many seconds do you think it will take you to get upstairs and back to the tub? And so you make a bet. How long will it take you? I think you can do it X seconds. He says, oh, I think I can do it in X seconds. Whoever wins gets a whatever. Think of something. I don't know. A Cheerio. Make it whatever you offer your kid. And so you have a bet based on that. So you run up and you start the bath run. Then he comes back down. Then you say, okay, in 3 minutes, now you can go back to playing your game for 3 minutes, whatever game he was playing. In 3 minutes, how many inches do you think the bathtub will fill up? Because he's got the bathtub running. So in 3 minutes, how many inches do you think it will fill up? And you make a bet based on that and see who's closest. Then he takes the ruler up and he measures, and you have to tell him at what point in the tub to measure it. It becomes a fun game. So how many inches will it be? He bets 3 inches. You bet the bathtub will be filled to 3.5 inches. Then you bet, what will the temperature of the water be? Or can he turn the temperature of the water to get close to X degrees? And you teach him what a safe temperature of the tub is going to be. Things like that, so that he won't burn himself when he first steps into the tub. You make taking a bath a game instead of the onerous, unbearable chore that it usually is. So that by the time he steps into the tub, you've turned it into 4 or 5 entertaining little games. Instead of just, I'm going to interrupt whatever it is that you're doing to go up there and take a bath. Kids love choices. Notice that in the process, you've also taught him measuring time, temperature, and distance with a ruler. So you've also educated him in addition to teaching him to make choices. And you've taught him that he still has to take a bath. And that you don't respond to getting and protecting behaviors. You've taught him about 9 different useful lessons, as opposed to, I'm the horrible witch of a mother or horrible SOB of a father who's going to make you take a bath. Not a useful life lesson. So lots of very cool things that you can do around just a simple bath taking. And that's just a few of them. I'm going to take a note of these questions that are being sent to me because I'm going to get to the ones that were sent to me first. I have 2 friends that I've had identical conversations with. One guy is interviewing for a job and believes that it's rude when they don't notify you when they are not offering him the job. We talk a lot about real love. So I asked him if he may have an expectation of the business. His reply is a strong no. It's just a common courtesy if they're interviewing. No matter how I would phrase it, he said that it was not an expectation on his part, but it was a matter of them being rude. A few days later, I had a conversation with a mutual friend who's a teacher with Landmark, which is a self-development group, and he strongly agreed. He said it was rude and not respecting our friend by offering him a common courtesy. Maybe I just don't get it and I'm missing something here. Well, you're not missing something here. The guy's being a victim. It's only rude if they promised to him clearly at the time that they did the interview that they would notify him. Otherwise, if they didn't, he has no right to an expectation that they would notify him if they didn't get the job, and they owe him absolutely nothing. When somebody goes and applies for a job, the people who are looking for applicants don't owe the people who apply a thing. Would it be sweet and nice and loving and gentle of them and considerate to notify every person that they received an application from, or every person that they interviewed, that they were not going to hire that person? Yeah, it really would be nice of them. But it's also an expenditure of time, and since it's paid time, it's also an expenditure of money that they're not obligated to make. And so, what this guy defines as a common courtesy is not necessarily a common courtesy to them. And so, he's not in charge of the commonly accepted rules of courtesy for the universe. So he doesn't get to define what's rude. And it's pretty clear that he has an investment in what he defines as rude. So he does have an expectation. Clearly he does. And he doesn't get to define what rude is. Now, would it be more loving on their part to notify him? Sure. But he doesn't get to have an expectation about what is loving on the part of other people. He's not entitled to tell them that they should be loving, nor are any of us. And we only get to have an expectation when there's a clearly defined contract. And when he applied, I'll bet you anything that there was nothing in the application process that said we're obligated to notify you when we turn you down. In fact, his labeling their behavior as rude probably qualifies as just as rude as what he has labeled as rude. So we make a pretty huge mistake when we go to label other people's behavior as rude in our eyes, because we spend our whole lives feeling offended, slighted, not treated as we feel like we should have been, and as opposed to expecting nothing at all and then feeling grateful. Feeling grateful is a way happier way to live. My child can be very slow, says this parent, in responding to requests or directions. If you have questions, by the way, we have quite a few that have been sent in. Please don't hesitate to send them here live, and I'm going to keep them because we may be able to get to some of them. My child can be very slow in responding to requests or directions, like, prepare for bed, go get something, and so on. So how do I change this? Children who are slow in responding to our requests or directions actually cause a fair bit of inconvenience for everybody around them. And we need to teach them that has consequences, that it's actually an unloving and selfish act. And it's not that we're telling them to hurry up just because it inconveniences us. This is really important. So when a child is slow to respond to our request, for example, to get ready for school or to get out the door because we need to get in the car and be on time to something, it's not just a matter of we're inconvenienced. They need to understand that for the rest of their lives, other people have needs and schedules to keep and so on, and they're not the center of the universe. Being on time and responding quickly to other people's needs, requests, schedules, and so on is a loving act. They need to learn to be responsible and loving. It's part of learning to be a happy human being. We need to teach them that. And we have to teach them that without irritation. If we're irritated, all they learn is that they do the right thing so that we are convenienced, so that we are happy, so that we are pleased. And that doesn't teach them anything except please the great big monstrous bullies in their lives, meaning us. That doesn't help them at all. So what do? First, we love them and teach them. With this child of yours, you tell him that he's slowing people up and he's inconveniencing them, and that's inconsiderate and unloving of him, that people don't like it, that it doesn't work for other people, that it screws up their schedules, that it makes things very difficult for them. Then, after you teach him that several times, it's very likely that won't make any impact at all, because I'm a realistic parent. So you teach the kid the effect that he has on other people, and then he'll look at you like, so what? I don't care. Then you teach him through consequences. And it can be very effective to teach a child the effect that he has on other people by showing him what it's like in his life to do to him what he does to other people. But you have to do this in a very loving way. You can't be irritated, or it's just bullying him. It's just revenge. So, for example, let's say that he wants something. So, for example, he's 5 years old, and he says, Dad, would you get me the cereal out of the top shelf? It's something that only you can reach. And you say, well, sure, I'd be glad to. And then what you do is you pick up a book and you sit down at the dining room table and you start reading. And he looks at you like, what are you doing? And he says, I want the cereal. And you say, I know, I'm getting to it. I'll be with you in a minute. And then you go back to reading. And he says, I want the cereal now. And you say, and if possible, you use exactly the words that he tends to use. Well, I just have one more game to play. Or you say, well, I just have to go to the bathroom. And then you get up and you go to the bathroom. Well, I have to just do this in my room. If possible, you use exactly the words that he uses. And then when he finally becomes really annoyed with you, you say, do any of these words sound familiar to you? And very often, the children will recognize those words. And then you smile at them. There's no irritation or vengeance. And you say, this is what you do. This is what you did yesterday. And then you be prepared to give him some examples of exactly when he did that. You can't teach children in generalities. You can't say, well, this is what you do. No, children don't learn that way. You have to say, this is what happened yesterday when we were getting ready to go in the car to school, to church, to whatever it was. And everybody was ready, but you piddled around and said, well, but I just have to do this. Well, I just couldn't find my shirt. And so you're going to use the same quotes with him. Or let's say he has to get to soccer practice, and if he's late, he doesn't get to play in the game on Saturday. And so you do the same thing. You just piddle around and you use the same quotes with him that he uses with you when he's not on time. And when he gets more exasperated, you just go slower and slower, and then eventually you say, do you see how inconveniencing this is? And that's what you do. So you need to see the cost to you of being inconvenienced when people don't care about you. That's how it feels to other people when you don't care about them. So, What did you learn? And then if you have to teach him that lesson multiple times, eventually he'll learn the lesson. But there can be no irritation, or all he'll feel like is that you're getting him back because you're bigger. And that'll teach him nothing but revenge. Here's somebody who said they had been to, they'd been to the parenting seminar in Phoenix. And after they got home, this parent wrote and said, I had an opportunity to listen to my 11-year-old share his life with me last night. And instead of fixing him, I tried to just listen and love him. And as I started to share what I've learned with him, his face just began to light up. He said, it's just amazing how quick they get it. So instead of doing the usual, lecturing and fixing him, he just loved his son and saw a huge difference immediately. Our kids really are amazing how quickly they catch on to the principles of real love. Here's somebody who says, I'm a social retard. I don't know how to relate to people and in social settings. I usually feel out of place and awkward. Now, how simultaneously sad this is to hear, and yet how delightful. It's liberating. Why? Because, look at this. I'm a social retard, which could only be as a result of a lack of love. Love is what creates the bonds that makes us socially adept. Nobody created these bonds for you. Nobody loved and taught you. And sometimes there's also a genetic component involved in this. Just as people are genetically predisposed to being, for example, musical geniuses, people are also genetically predisposed to being more socially adept. Analogously, people are also genetically predisposed to being less socially adept. So you have to factor in that some people are genetically just not as disposed to being socially brilliant. So that may play in there. So don't feel too terrible about this. Either through genes or social upbringing, you were pretty much brought to this place. So what needs to be done is just to do what it takes to get enough social skill, not necessarily to make you socially brilliant, but to bring you at least more happiness in your life. That's what you want, is to make you happier, whatever that looks like. Then you continue. On the whole, people don't like to hang out with me. On more than one occasion, people have told me that I'm intense, which means that you likely use imitation love in the form of power and safety. When people use power or control people to feel safe, other people tend to respond by saying that that person is intense. It frightens them. So you probably attack people. You control them to feel powerful and safe. You continue. A Hispanic worker that we had hired told my wife that he thought I was a government official, which is understandable. Those are usually frightening people. That was sarcastic, not meant to be loving, actually. I've lived in anger for close to 40 years, and with real love, I've come to realize how much of that comes from the underlying feeling of being like a victim. When we see an angry person, we tend to see them as monstrous, as perpetrators, and we forget that anger begins in victimhood. Anger is a reaction. And we feel like then our anger is justified because of something that somebody did to us. You continue. I'm one of those 3-year-olds in a big body, and he describes his height. He's a big man. The big babies that you described in a recent seminar I attended. Men that can look scary but are dying to be loved on the inside. It's a lonely place. It is a lonely place, especially for men, even more so for large, scary men. Women don't understand that men get cut no slack at all and feel even more lonely than most women will ever understand. Nobody sees them as needing affection. They see them as big and scary, and so they fight them and run from them and lie to them, and everything just spirals downward. Whereas these great big scary men just need to be loved. which is why I really especially enjoy working with them, because really, usually, they're pretty easy to love. If somebody would reach out to these great big scary men and just touch them and just say, I'm not frightened by you. I can see that you're just empty and afraid. They usually just melt like butter. You continue. I'm listening to the archived video chats and recently heard the one where someone called into the chat and talked about his experience as a social retard. I can very much relate, and listening to the conversation helped. I'm blessed to have a real love men's group in my town, and men have loved me through accepting that I feel and act like a victim. I've also come to realize how eager I am to buy people's approval by manipulating them or even abusing a position of power that they have entrusted in me. That's just a wonderfully open and honest thing to say. And it's as a result of speaking openly and honestly like that that you will create those bonds of connection with people that will eliminate your emptiness and loneliness and eliminate that social retardation, which only exists because you have been alone for so long. So, delightful. What you're doing here is exactly the kind of thing that you need to do to eliminate that just painful, horrifying loneliness. So, nice move. You're doing exactly what you need to do. Here's somebody who says, as you know, I sell moving services. This particular person works for a moving company and goes in and does appraisals and sells the services for this company to come in and move families and businesses. Because I go out to the customer with loving them being my goal, I often make a nice personal connection. I have noticed, however, that quite often when I connect with a customer personally, if they feel they cannot use my service, they will completely discontinue communicating with me. I wonder if they are afraid that I will be disappointed in them. Maybe. Two things. That's often the case. Our fear of disappointing people goes with us everywhere. And the other part of it is that often if people meet us in a business setting and feel that they can't do business with us, they can't see any reason to ever contact us again. Once they see that the business relationship is over, that's the end of it. Then you continue. It's problematic because sometimes when I communicate with the potential client about the estimate and listen to what they need, we could often work out something to make the move work for them. Often it's just a matter of changing the level of services. But if the customer won't call back for whatever reason, I can't open this dialogue. So you can see the problem. I mean, if only they would call you back, you could work it out, but they don't call you back. Of course, that's true with most business relationships. Do you have any recommendations? Is there something I can say at the time of the initial meeting that could alleviate this problem? Maybe. And it would take them trusting you. But you could say something like what you actually just said to me. It would be just saying it to them. You could say, if you have questions, call, which we always say at a sales call, but more than that, if you feel like you can't make this work, if you decide that this business arrangement is not for you, if you feel like that this will not be a fit for you, don't make that decision on your own. What I'm asking you to do is to trust me enough to call and see if there's something we can do to be flexible and accommodate your needs. See if we can offer you an adjustment, a flexibility, a something, so that we can meet your needs in such a way that we can still do business together. So all I'm asking that you do is, rather than take our proposal as set in stone, allow us to genuinely care about your needs to the point that we can give you another offer. That's all I'm asking that you do. So you could do that. Which would be consistent with real love too, showing that you genuinely care about them. And would also be more profitable business-wise. Now, whether they believe you is another thing, but it would give you an opportunity to serve them better. Here's a parent who by phone said to me that their 7-year-old was behaving badly at school and was apparently having a fit, throwing things and kicking and all that stuff at school. And so the school either wrote or called, I can't remember which now, and said that the child received the consequence of, schools are strange, but they all have their own little pattern. But the particular consequence in this school was, I guess every child has a little tree, and there are apples, or maybe the whole class has a tree. But anyway, every kid has a labeled apple. And if you screw up, then your apple falls farther down the tree. And if you screw up enough times, then your apple falls off the tree. It's kind of a scary metaphor. I don't know if it falls off the tree fast enough. Does it break apart and you explode? It's scary to me. But if your apple falls off the tree, then you lose some privilege. And in this particular case, the kid lost recess or something. And so the note came home saying, your kid lost recess because he had a little fit at school. And this was the father calling me. And I guess the wife was really infuriated that the kid had behaved badly at school, and was telling the father that, well, now our child has behaved badly at school, and so we need to punish the child at home. And so the father said, so what should we do? Well, remember, the whole idea of consequences is to teach the child with an inconvenient consequence. The consequence is to make the behavior inconvenient enough so that he won't repeat the behavior. And it should follow naturally from the behavior. Well, the child already received a consequence at school for the behavior at school. So why would he come home and receive another consequence at home for a behavior at school? See this? That makes no sense at all. Not to me. If it doesn't make sense to me, how could it make sense to a 7-year-old? So if I don't get it, how do you expect a 7-year-old to get it? The 7-year-old will not get it. The 7-year-old will feel punished. I promise you the child will. However, it is a wonderful opportunity to teach the child. So when the kid gets home, you don't be standing there at the doorway with your hands on your hips. The child's going to feel unloved. So sometime later in the evening, you say to the child, hey, I understand that you can do it however you want to, but in my household, I can tell you how I'd do it. I understand your apple fell off the tree. Because the kid's going to know exactly what I'm talking about. And then we would talk about what happened. So you lost recess. And then I'd say, how did you like that, losing recess? I didn't like it, he's going to say. See, you're trying to teach him the natural consequence, the natural result of his behavior. He's going to say, well, I didn't like it. I'll bet you didn't. So the next time you go to throw... so when you say, how did you like it? He's going to say, I didn't like it. And then the next words out of his mouth, most of the time, unless he's a child who's been well-schooled in real love, it's very likely he's going to say, it's just not fair. Right? This is going to be a great opportunity to teach this kid. And so then you teach him how fair consequences are. So you say, so it's not fair. So then you teach him how consequences are always fair. You teach him, for example, that if you're walking down the street, any time you want to, you can run out and play in the middle of the road. You, as an adult. I can step out in front of an oncoming car any time I want. And your child will look at you like, what? But if I step out in front of an oncoming car and a car hits me, then I can't say, it's just not fair. I can go up on the roof of our house and I can jump off the roof of the house anytime I want to. But then if I break my ankle, I can't say, it's just not fair. I can fill my stomach with chocolate candy anytime I want to. And then if I get a stomach ache, I have to live with the consequence. There's a price to be paid for every behavior. And most of the time, we know the price ahead of time. So, let me ask you, when you had a fit, did you know ahead of time that there was a rule in class that if your behavior was like that the apple would fall from the tree? Did you know that rule ahead of time?
Well, yeah.
So, pretty much, You chose beforehand that you weren't going to get recess. Man, sounds fair to me. Actually sounds kind of dumb to me. You chose not to have recess. You chose that. It's your choice. You show no sympathy, whatever. And what you do is you just drive the lesson home. And so then you say, so next time in class when you feel like having a fit, do you think you'll choose to lose recess? Do you think? What do you think? And so the kid's going, they hate this. But you don't stop there. Now you teach them what most parents never teach. Now you teach them the alternative behavior. That's the part parents don't do. All they teach children is no, 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 don't, no, 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 no. Any parent can say no. I mean, I can teach a parrot to say no. Actually, probably teach a pig to say no. It's easy to do that. Now what you do is you say, so what was it you were having a fit about? And the kid will tell you, well, I was mad because blank. The kid next to me, blah, blah, blah. And so you say, so what could you have said to the kid next to you instead of having a fit? What could you have done instead? And you teach the child a more productive behavior. That's what we don't do. Now you have taught the child a truly useful life skill, as opposed to the child comes home from school, he got in trouble at school, and now we're going to whip him with a belt. Now there's a useful life skill. See how stupid that is? Now let's love him and teach him instead of punishing the child. Now this is a celestial experience for the child. You're going to really bless this child's life by teaching him instead of adding to the consequences. He doesn't need another one. Should I announce this? We've just made a major change to the website, so you might kind of like pass it around to the world, I would suggest. Send this email out to every soul on the planet. We've just made all the services on the website free. So everybody now has access to all parts of the website all the time, anytime. So every single part of the website now is accessible to anybody whenever they want to come. So the video chats, the video coaching, name it. So we're trying to make Real Love more accessible to all the world. And in order to do that, we've eliminated all fees having to do with the website ever. So if you would, please announce this to everybody. We're trying to draw more people to Real Love. Okay. Yeah, I'm saving that to the end. Here's somebody who says, I have an eating disorder. I've been obsessing about how I look and what I eat from the time I was a small child. I've had to look perfect and be perfect, and it's taken over my life. That's me. I've been anorexic from the time I was a small child. I just didn't want everybody to know. That's like a joke. Well, I've discovered real love now, and I just can't keep living like this. But the thing is, I'm afraid that if I try to talk to people about it, they just won't get it. Most people say things like, but you look fine, you have no reason to worry, you can afford to put on a few pounds, etc., are the usual replies, and that's as far as it ever goes. You can't imagine how silly that sounds to somebody who's anorexic. You look fine, you could afford to put on a few pounds. I mean, that's just like insane. That's like saying to somebody who says, I have cancer. Well, you know, that doesn't look so bad. It just doesn't make any sense to them. Or, don't be silly. People who have obsessions, with food get on my nerves. You can imagine how compassionate that sounds. Or people just change the subject and start talking about themselves. That just doesn't do it for me. It really doesn't help. And so her question to me, this was on the phone. earlier today, actually, was so. How do I bring this up with people? How do I find people who can understand me and accept me? And my response to her was, well, it was longer than this, but essentially have you ever looked for 4-leaf clovers? She said, well, yeah. How do you look for them? How do you find them? She said, well, you just look for them. Yeah, but you look for them by looking through what? 3-leaf clovers. How many? Well, as many as it takes. And I've looked for 4-leaf clovers, and depending on the patch you're in, you may have to look through thousands of 3-leaf clovers to find a single 4-leaf clover. And if you're sufficiently motivated to find a 4-leaf clover, then it's worth it, isn't it? And there's no other way to find one. There's not like a 4-leaf clover magnet. There's not like 4-leaf clover food that you can put out and attract 4-leaf clovers. You just have to look for them. So if you have to go through 1,000 3-leaf clovers to find a 4-leaf clover, then that's what it takes. And that's what it takes sometimes to find wise men and women. That's sometimes what it takes to find the people who can particularly see you and love you as whoever you are. So you go out and you just experiment with telling a little bit of the truth about yourself. Like so in your case, you say, I've had an eating disorder from the time I was a little kid. I obsess about food and how I look, and I obsess about being and looking perfect. And if the person that you're talking to goes, well, but you look fine to me, or if the person you're with says, well, why don't we just go down to McDonald's and I'll get a Big Mac down you? Pretty clearly they're not understanding what you're talking about, are they? That it's not about food. It's not about getting a few calories down you. It's about you needing to feel accepted and loved. Whereas if the person that you're talking to says, well, I can certainly understand that. You must have felt not accepted and not loved from the time you were a little kid. Tell me more about that. What if they say that? Bingo! 4-leaf clover. So then you tell them more. So if they give you a stupid response, you may tell them a little more, or you may stop and move on to somebody else. But if they give you an understanding, a seeing, and an accepting response, a loving response, you tell them more. This is pretty simple. People keep telling me, how do I find these people? Tell them a little bit of truth. You don't have to go out there and tell them your entire life story to find these people. It only takes this much. And then you have a clue. Then you tell them a little more. And you just keep going from there. That's how you find those people. You find people who will laugh at your craziness and still love you. During my conversation with this person, I said, you need to find people who can do what I'm doing right now, which is to identify you as, well, nuts. Because what you're doing to your body is nuts. It's a kind of insanity that you've adopted to adapt to an insane way you were raised. It's quite understandable. But you need to feel loved while you're insane, not while you're perfect. See, your entire life felt like you had to be perfect to be lovable. That's why you're crazy. You've made yourself crazy. Other people have made you crazy because you felt like you had to be perfect. And what I'm telling you is you're not. In fact, you're kind of nutty. And I still love you. You need to feel loved while you're crazy. And you need to find people who can see that you're crazy and who aren't bothered by it, who aren't frightened by it, who don't try to tell you, oh, you're not crazy. In fact, that's why I use words like crazy, stupid, nutty, flawed. Why? Because we have to learn to embrace those words, not avoid those words. It's when we avoid them that we're falling into that same trap that has kept us that way, crazy. It's we're demonstrating that once again we believe we have to be not crazy. We have to be flawless. We have to be perfect in order to be loved. That's the problem. It's when we believe that we're loved while we're flawed, nuts, imperfect, that's when we feel loved. So you got to find those people. And then later in the day, I got this from her. She said, thanks for talking to me, and she told a bunch of lies about me. And then said, she said, I thought about bringing this up at my group, but she said, I'm too scared yet to do this, but I'll start small and maybe I'll get there soon. So you can see the problem here is not with other people. The problem is with you. The problem is with you being too afraid to tell the truth about yourself to other people. As you get the courage to do this, you will find those people. Now the problem used to be with your parents, but now the problem is being perpetuated by you. And that's okay, because if you see that the problem is with you, guess who the solution is now with? You're in charge of the solution as you tell the truth. Hallelujah! Because if the problem is with your parents, well, then the solution would be with your parents and you'd be doomed. However, you continue, I still don't see how I'm going to change this behavior that has been ingrained in me for so long by simply talking about it. Well, you could always use the solution you've adopted so far, which is not talking about it. As you talk about it, as you share with people your need to be perfect, it will become obvious to you as you're talking about it with people who are loving that you're not perfect, that you're hugely flawed, and that they don't care. And as you feel loved by these people while you're imperfect, you will lose your need to be perfect. You'll lose your need to control things. And one of the things you need to control is the way you eat. So you said you don't see how you're going to change this behavior just by talking about it. It's talking about it. It's the only way it's going to change it. It's in the process of talking about it and feeling loved while you talk about it. That's what's going to make all the difference. You don't need to see how it's going to work. You need to feel how it's going to work. So just go do it. And quit talking about doing it. Just go talk about it. So don't talk about talking about it. Just go talk about it to the people who are going to love you. Quit thinking, is what I'm saying. Just go feel it. New question. My daughter, Kim, age 10 and a half. That was a great age. When it mattered to you that you were something and a half. Left her house key at her friend's house. She called the friend, Madeline, to ask if she could pick up the key. Madeline said no, because she was busy. Then Kim asked if Madeline would bring the key to school tomorrow, and Madeline said, I may or may not. Don't you just love this? I mean, 10 and a half years old and has already mastered the art of snottiness. Then Madeline said, I have a new best friend. I love this. Has already mastered snottiness squared. And she's not 11 yet. So Kim is feeling very angry and devastated by this interaction, and that is why she's asking me to write to you about this. What to do with her feelings and Madeline. Madeline has repeatedly shunned Kim and has not talked to her, and then, when the mood shifts, she's friendly again, which is very common in adult relationships too. Use people, not use people. Use people, not use people. And you need to see this pattern. It's all about using. Here's my part. I called the mother to inform her that I was, the mother of Madeline, that I was coming over to pick up Kim's key, house key. Madeline answered and said that her mother was sleeping. So I emailed the mom and simply said that I need to pick up Kim's key tonight. If they're busy, could they leave it in the mailbox and I'd come by? There has been no reply. So I too feel frustrated. whole family of frustrated in one half and snotty in the other half. This child's mother is also someone who is a very good friend and cut me off 1 year ago because she said, "I can't wrap my mind around how you parent." This makes perfect sense, doesn't it? I don't like how you parent, so I will cut you off as my friend. And that was a reference to the fact that I parent in a real love manner, and she can't understand why I don't spank my child and why I treat her like a human being. Just some of these are just too funny. You couldn't make these up. I am going to cut you off because you don't spank your child enough. So this is a two-part thing. Any insights into how we can apply real love to this situation would be great. So this is a beautiful opportunity to teach a child about the law of choice. I mean, like, man, this is just unparalleled. People really get to make their own choices, even when they're, in fact, especially when they're unloving and snotty, and when they're hateful, and when they make their own choices that affect us in an unloving way. Even when they're doing the wrong thing. Even when they have our property and they're supposed to return it. Then, once they've made the wrong choice, we now have the right to make our own choice. And we can choose to be angry and demanding and control them so that they'll make the choice that we like. We can do that, but in the first place, that rarely leads to them making the choice that we want. Most of us spend our entire lives trying to control other people, and most of the time, it never works. Most of the time, we don't ever get other people to do what we want. And it always succeeds in ruining our happiness. So that would seem like a really stupid choice on our part, but of course that's just me talking. So we could choose to be angry and demanding and control people, but man, it's miserable for everybody, unproductive and unhappy. So you look your daughter in her little tear-filled eyes and you tell her that you understand her pain. You tell her you get it. You know this hurts. It's happened to you at losing her friend. But you say, you also know that this is how the world works. People get to make these choices. They really do. And that this will happen to her again and again and again. You promise her that this will. With girlfriends and boyfriends and business associates and relatives, and it's going to happen over and over again. And you're going to teach her a lesson that's going to save her more pain than you could possibly calculate. So this is about to become the greatest blessing in her life. How cool is this? So you're going to teach her that she can agonize over this and let it ruin her life. That's one choice. Or she can try to change the other person, which will also ruin her life. Or she can accept the fact that other people get to make their choices, which is beautiful, and will make the whole rest of her life happy. No kidding. It's kind of like the American Express commercial. You know how the American Express commercial comes on and they're out there golfing and it says, round of golf, $120. Set of golf clubs, $350. Day with Dad, priceless. Well, it's like that here. You can choose agonizing over the decisions that other people make, death. Changing the choices that other people make, death. Or accepting the choices that other people make and learning to be loving and happy. Priceless. Life. Joy. And that's what you're going to teach your daughter. As opposed to living how everybody else lives. Almost everybody. Which is the other ways. And their death. It's a miserable way to live. See, everybody thinks they can change them. Well, I'm going to march over there and get that key. Well, you could. That's one way to go. So now let's get to the key. Or I'm going to change that girl. Or she can't dump me as her best friend. Yeah, she really can. And she's mean-spirited and fickle. Yeah. Don't lie about it. She is. And she gets to be. So now what about the key? Because this applies to you too and the mother. Call the house again. I mean, call the house when, at a time you think the mother would be up. She may be a vampire and not be up after dark. Who knows? Call the mother at work. Give her several calls if necessary. You want to be really careful about escalating this into a battle, because if it becomes too confrontational, I tell you, it's going to translate into conflict that the daughter, Madeline, is going to take to school, and your daughter is going to pay for it. So we think, well, but I have a right to that key. Yeah, you do. And I'm going to get that key back. Yeah, and that's how the Hatfields and the McCoys all died. And that's how Israel and Palestine ended up at war for the last several decades, because they're both right, and they're both dead right. And that's how Iran and Iraq were at civil war for 40 years, and that's how 1 million people died in Rwanda, and everybody was dead right. So, yeah, you can do that. So you make a reasonable effort to get the key back if you can, but the odds that, somebody in that household are going to use the key to come and rob you are, think about it, probably not likely. And you make a reasonable effort to get it, and if you're really paranoid, you could change the locks. Probably not reasonable you're going to get robbed, so think about it. It really is all about real love, and you're going to teach your daughter a simply stunning lesson in how to be happy. I would recommend that course. That's just me. So, I talked way too long. There's only 3 minutes left. I don't have a question that's 2 minutes long. So I would recommend that you guys share with as many people as you can the fact that we're going to have a free website, and we'll get more people to come back to the site next week. Also, send to me, we're going to go with the questions that we didn't get to this week, and then I got a question here that was sent live here at the end, or actually it was at the beginning, that I'll get to also next week. And send them to me at greg@reallove.com. And you guys have been wonderful, as usual. So we'll be loving you, and we'll get to as many questions as we can next Tuesday, and I look forward to that. It's just been, as I alluded to earlier, priceless. You guys are the best. We'll see you in a week.